Hi everyone, my name is Rui Ma and I'm a former VC, now turned independent tech analyst, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about going abroad. This is my second 8x8. My first 8x8 was on failure. That was quite a heavy topic, and I'm really happy that I'm talking about something much lighter. My experience is in both US and China tech, actually focusing on cross border. So I hope that some of my advice for you is going to be really relevant and help you reduce your frustrations as you go on this very important journey of expanding beyond China. So here we go. My first advice that I always give to everyone is to give a lot of background and context. So that's because I find that most people under-explain rather than over-explain the significance of what they're doing, especially when you cross geography and ecosystem borders. What you'll find is that, a lot of things people don't really understand and they're too embarrassed to tell you. So if you have something significant or important, don't assume the other side understands. Explicitly tell them why you're telling them this. A great example is, for example, a lot of people here have heard of the company Alibaba. Maybe your company management came out of Alibaba. However, just because someone here has heard of Alibaba doesn't mean they know what Alibaba is well known for, right? It doesn't mean they understand the significance of oh, my founding team was in charge of XYZ initiative at Alibaba. You're going to have to explain to them why that was important. So over-explain rather than under-explain, and really hone in on your strengths. Don't assume people know what you're talking about. Next, learn to earn your media mentions early. I'm going to be a little biased here because I also have a podcast, so I'm somewhat of a media content creator. And lots of people come to me when their companies are quite mature and they ask me Ray, how do I get some mainstream media to talk about my company? How do I get my story told? And a lot of the times my reaction is why weren't you doing this earlier? It's 2021. We're building in public now. How can you be waiting until your company is really late stage to start telling your story? So if you have any intention ever of going abroad, you should start thinking about, do you have a strategy for earning media, especially media abroad, to talk about you? Especially here in the West, there is much less efficiency when you go with sponsored content or paid media. Really try to build those relationships early, understand the publications and writers who might be covering you, and get to know them early. You'd be surprised how interested they are in getting to know startup stories, especially stories from China. You just need to go find them early. Don't go to them at the very last minute and say, I have a major product announcement, cover me tomorrow. That's not nice. That's just not a nice thing to do. Here is a great example, advice from, actually this is from one of my friends named Kevin. He runs Interconnected blog, and which is a great bilingual resource, by the way, for those of you interested in going abroad in open source. But he was actually the international GM of a Chinese unicorn, and this is very specific to enterprise companies, and it's something I think a lot of Chinese enterprise companies don't realize, and that is there are highly influential industry analysts, let's call it, from Gartner, Forrester, etc., other publications, whose reports really influence large enterprises and their purchasing decisions. So if you want to be included in those reports, if you want those analysts to know your product and talk about you positively, you want to get to know them early. You want to get to know them as early as Series A or B, actually, so that by the time you're in Series C and you're ready to seriously sell into the US or Europe or wherever, you already know these analysts, and they can vouch for you, and they can say, hey, I know this company. They're great. So you want to do that early. See? Trend. Early. Do it early. Another kind of tactical thing, focus on design, onboarding, UI, and usability. Really, the main word here I really want you to take away is onboarding. So again, I'm not asking you to change your product entirely, right? Hopefully your product has a good product logic and business model that fits overseas, and you don't have to change too much for product market fit. However, you'll find that even for the largest Chinese companies, let's think about Douyin and TikTok, they had to change their onboarding for their overseas users, even though the core logic of the product really is quite similar, right? So don't underestimate how different user behaviors can be, and just don't get killed on the onboarding side. There's of course also other design tweaks you can do, etc. But I find that if you're losing someone at the onboarding side, they're not even gonna see the design tweaks you make for them, right? So make sure you localize that aspect. And by the way, it doesn't have to be very expensive or time consuming, but it is very, very important to do. Okay, the same story that works for China most likely won't abroad. Maybe not everything, but I wanted to sort of emphasize that it most likely won't. So let me give you an example, right? So when you go talk to Chinese investors, employees, customers, etc., there's this one, I noticed one narrative that is very applauded, very much applauded, and that is, oh, hey, we're using Chinese engineering talent and selling abroad. That sounds like a great story, right? The investors are thinking like, oh my gosh, taking advantage of the labor and wage differential. It's great. Well, think about it. Outside of China, that's not necessarily going to be necessarily deemed a competitive advantage or necessarily even a strength. You have to be very careful who you're talking to and thinking about from their perspective. Is your story that you're so used to telling inside of China as being like really, really relevant and really great for your company, is that necessarily going to get the same reaction abroad? I guarantee you, a lot of the time, it's not. So try to place yourself in the listener's shoes, and if you don't know what the listener is thinking, then go find some other people who have a bicultural background and ask them, what is the best way to tell my story? Because a lot of the same narratives don't have the same punch and could in fact be detrimental or negative abroad. Next. Yeah, 996. No. I think probably most of you are not going to make this mistake, but I wanted to emphasize it anyway. 996 is just not a great thing here in the West, especially in Silicon Valley. People are going to want their weekends. You're going to find yourself not able to recruit. And to be honest, I don't think it's a good PR tactic. Even if you're just talking about your China offices, people are horrified at the overwork conditions, and it is just generally not a good thing to be doing. So don't talk about it like it's something really you're proud of, and really, really, really don't expect to be enacting that kind of schedule here. Be also very extra careful with your data and security. Again, we're in a tense time globally, of course, geopolitical tensions. But even aside from that, I can tell you that it's been a few years going where, users care about their data, and governments are more and more cognizant of tech companies and what everyone's collecting. So there is just regulatory pressure globally. And as of now, I can confidently tell you that just because you're small, you're not going to get away with saying like, oh, I'm a small company, I didn't have time to think about this. Nope. No matter what size you are, please, please, please think twice. Think 3 times before you make any data decisions that are shortcuts, because you really don't want to get in trouble for being careless with user data and security. Actually act like you're an international company. I think this is rather self-explanatory, but let me just give you an example. I visited the Silicon Valley offices of a large Chinese internet company maybe 2 years ago. And one of the things that we were talking about was how they were having trouble recruiting local employees. Now, they had a large office and they had a lot of Chinese diaspora, but it wasn't very diverse. and I went to visit their offices, and immediately I was like, well, I can tell you why. In your office, you have people napping at their desks. You have Chinese snacks everywhere. You have slogans in your company slogans in your bathrooms. I mean, this office feels like it's run by someone who just landed from Pudong, right? It does not feel very Silicon Valley. And again, I'm not saying this is the most important reason why they couldn't hire locally, but I think this is certainly one of the reasons. So act like you're an international company. Try to figure out what the local customs are here, what local employees will be comfortable with, because again, it's the same thing as the 996 issue, right? If you are here, then you want to be recruiting locally, because otherwise, why be here? Just have everyone work remotely, right? So if you're going to bother with an office here and you're going to bother really trying to establish a serious presence, then make it easy for yourself to get local talent. It's worth it. So there you go, guys. That's it. That's my presentation. I really want to thank you all for listening. And I just want to end with a super positive note, which is that I myself am really, really bullish on Chinese companies expanding abroad, startups like you. I think that this is the best of times, honestly. And I want to wish you all very good luck. Take your great technology and your business model learnings and innovation, and just be cognizant of the differences in other ecosystems. Go find the media early, find your analysts early, hire locally, empower your employees, do all these things well. And I'm pretty sure that the next time I come back to 8x8, my third time, hopefully I will be not talking about how to succeed abroad, but actually talking about one of you as a case study of a company that has successfully expanded abroad. Thank you so much for having me, and have a good rest of the day.